Welcome everybody to this webinar. Today we're gonna talk about Power BI, visualizing success, Power BI insights for smarter decisions. Very nice title. Um, I'm just gonna be here, the moderator. Like, if you have questions, please put it in the chat, and I'll make sure Christy knows there is some questions being asked. Christy is going to be our presenter. She is an amazing consultant and data person. I'm not going to say data person, an amazing person altogether. And she's going to walk us through Power BI. And I am Ricardo Cobo, and I'm a principal consultant on app dev and modernization. You wanna do a little intro of yourself, Christy, before we?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Yeah, so hello, my name is Christy LaPlante. I actually like that you're tell me that you say I'm a data person. I take a lot of pride in that. Power BI is just one of many things that I do, but the heart of me is all into data. So I've been working with Central Logic and its predecessor companies for 16 years, full time for the last 10 years. Full time is in being, full time consultant, going to multiple client sites, working on projects always related to data, not just Power BI, but also SQL Server. All right, all technologies related to SQL Server, ETL technologies as well. In my current role, I'm doing quite a bit of work as well in Azure Data Factory and Databricks, because part of creating great Power BI reports is having great data to work with. So that's me. I'll let Ricardo take over for the
Let's.
next slide, and then you'll hear from me again.
Yes. So this webinar is it's sponsored or brought to you by Century Logic. Century Logic, it's a Microsoft solution partner, and it's been in business for more than 15 years. If you were paying attention, Christy has been working with Central Logic and predecessors for 16 years. So pretty much since it started. And we can help clients in many different ways, from visualizing, excuse me, visualizing solutions for modernization to creating landing zones, all the way to managed services. We have senior consultants and very capable staff that can help you in any of your needs, and we deliver across North America and Europe. We are also experimenting and have deployed Copilot solutions and OpenAI solutions. These are all the things that we're good at, mostly infrastructure in Azure, data and AI in Azure, and app innovation. But we also cover other clouds. Our focus, I would say, in our business group is Microsoft solutions. And that is all the marketing I can physically do. So let's hear from Christy about interesting stuff in Power BI.
Awesome. Thank you, Ricardo. So the agenda for today, in the 50 minutes or so that I have, we're going to talk about just what is Power BI, a little short bit on Power BI licensing. We'll talk about Power BI Desktop, the Power BI service, how people actually consume all of this hard work that people put into creating these Power BI reports and hosting them on the service. And then my favorite topic, we'll talk about the semantic models that you build with Power BI, and there will be a demo. Please, as I go through the presentation, please ask your questions in the chat window as we go. And Ricardo is very good at, finding little spots to jump in and ask those questions. I always prefer questions as we go through rather than at the end, because I would like your question to be answered when it's meaningful. So feel free to jump in into the chat window. Okay, so first off, what is Power BI? Well, one thing that we all know, and probably one reason why you're all here, is because companies are gathering more and more information stored as data in a variety of different systems, and we want to generate reports out of that, and we want these reports to be generated quickly as well. So Microsoft delivers a solution to us called Power BI. I pretty much copied this definition right from their website. What is Power BI? It's a suite of tools allowing businesses to deliver interactive insights to their data. So Microsoft considers Power BI not just the report building tool, but a whole bunch of services that work together to deliver those interactive insights. And what on earth does interactive insights mean? It means that you're giving really good meaning to your data in a graphical way from end users. Yes, it's our job as developers to make the insights and to understand our data well enough to make it meaningful. But what Power BI does is it allows us to make it easier by creating reports where people can click on different visuals and automatically see their data filtered and work with in very intuitive ways. So the tools that make up Power BI include Power BI Desktop. This is a free tool that we use for the development of reports themselves. Because it's free and people can find it easily and can download it. What you'll find in your companies is that there's probably lots of people using Power BI Desktop already, right? People outside of your reporting department, your IT department. I work at an engineering company right now. All of my engineers I think have found Power BI Desktop, and they start creating their own reports. One thing that's also very interesting is that elements of Power BI Desktop, which is what this presentation is about, some elements are also in Excel. So I see my engineers using this technology within Excel, which is, I think, their favorite tool. So they can create reports, and your IT department can create reports with Power BI Desktop. So once you create this report in this application, that's great. You now have a report running in Power BI Desktop on your local machine, hence the name Power BI Desktop. But how do you then get that report to become available to other people, right? Because that's the whole point. You don't want to create a report just for yourself. You want to create reports for the entire team. That's where the Power BI service comes into play. So although Power BI Desktop is free to use and download, right? The Power BI service is not. It's a service that you actually pay for. And now you can take your reports and you can put them up into the cloud, because it's a SaaS service where the reports can then be shared and administered to the whole team and your whole organization. So that's where you really start getting the power. Once your report is up in this cloud service and made available, the next thing and the third thing on the list is, how do people then start viewing these reports and interacting with them easily. So they can do that through Power BI mobile apps and a technology called Power BI Embedded. We'll talk more about the multiple ways that you can consume Power BI reports as we move on. So overall, Microsoft has given us technologies to, one, with Power BI Desktop, do the development. With a second bulleted point, make these reports available to multiple people other than just yourself. And then with a third bulleted point, give users a nice interactive interface to work with the reports. Licensing. This is not meant to be a detailed talk on licensing. I'm not an expert in licensing. Please talk to Microsoft if you have any specific questions. I literally copied this right from their website so that I didn't do any interpretation. So what you can do in the Power BI service depends on three things. The type of license and subscription that you're using, the type of workspace, and roles and permissions. So let's go through each one of them one by one. So the type of license, Power BI Desktop by itself is free, right? You can create reports for free, but then they're just for you, right? So how do you then get them shared? You are going to put them up into the cloud service. Now, this cloud service, the Power BI cloud service, that is also what needs to be licensed. Many companies will opt to have what we call a premium capacity license. Once you have that established, then your users with free licenses will be able to connect to the Power BI service. They'll be able to connect to the workspace, and they will be able to view the content. Okay, but still the users who have a free license, who are not paying, will only be able to view those reports in the premium capacity workspace. They will not be able to create reports. In order to create reports, you need to have a Power BI Pro license, and that will allow the user to, if they have permissions in the workspace, to then take their reports and go and publish them. Okay, so that's a quick overview of what the free and pro licenses mean for users. Like I mentioned, the second bulleted point, the type of workspace. If you have a premium content, then you will, free users will be able to connect to the workspace. If you do not have a premium capacity in your workspace, then the users will also require a professional license in order to view the report. So lots of options for you to go and take a look at for licensing. Now, the last bulleted point here, of course, just because you have a license does not mean that you have full reign and can view all of the reports within the workspace. It is then up to the administrator to use roles and permissions to control what people have access to. Any questions so far? Okay, so Power BI Desktop, this can be downloaded for free from the Microsoft Store. Anybody can use it. Once it is downloaded, then people can start making connections to the various data sources that they would like to consume within the report. The user will be expected to have a license to those data sources. When the user is creating their Power BI reports, what they are going to be generating in the end is a PBIX file. This PBIX file is going to include the report definition as well as the data. And this is really, really important to understand. And one thing that I try and emphasize with my users is that the PBIX file is the presentation of the report as well as the data itself. So what that means is that if somebody decides, hey, I'm going to go and email somebody my Power BI file, the data is going with it. And that's important to understand because you want to make sure you are securing your data. Of course, all of us like to have our data nice and secured within the database. One option that you do have if you're concerned about the Power BI including your data is to create a template file, a PBIT file. So once you store your report as a template, the report no longer stores the data. And it's a really nice way to send reports to other people. Once you send it to them, the Power BI will open up in Power BI Desktop just like a PBIX would, but then immediately they are asked to refresh the report. When they're asked to refresh the report, if they don't have access to the data sources, then refresh fails, right? So it's a nice way of ensuring security as things are moving. Also with source control, something to keep in mind, we store our PBIX files in source control, but when we have reports that are particularly sensitive, I remind our team to store them in source control as a PBIT file, right? We don't want to have sensitive data stored in our source control. Security when using Power BI, security is stored locally. So this is one thing that I always like to put into my presentations, and I remind my users of this at work. When you're using Power BI and you're connecting to a data source, it is going to ask you for your security credentials. You're going to type in the username and password. It makes you feel like it's actually being stored in Power BI because it's prompting you in Power BI Desktop, but in actual fact, that username and password is being stored securely on your local machine. There is no transfer of usernames and passwords when you take your PBIX and send it to someone else, which is a great thing. I've gotten Excels before where, embedded in the Excel is a username and password, which is not good for security. Okay, so it's stored locally. It's not stored in the file. And also, even when you go and publish your Power BI report to the Power BI service, those credentials do not get copied up to the server either. Once you actually publish, there's going to be an administrative task for you to go in and type in the username and password that should be used in the service itself. Okay. Are there any questions so far? Although I know Ricardo's great at jumping in if there are. Okay, so
I don't see anything, Kirsty, so
thanks.
Keep going.
Thank you. Oh, and I realized I forgot to mention one of my bulleted points here allows users to create semantic data models or use data models. One thing that is great about the architecture behind Power BI is that you can connect to other Power BI reports as a semantic data model. And that's going to be, let me just slide out of my slides here for a second. I'm going to just launch Power BI Desktop here. Right, and I'm going to pretend to be a brand new user. I clicked on blank report so I can start from scratch. Right, I get a nice user interface for building reports. A user can click get data and start building the report. You'll see me doing that in my demo. But what the users can also do is they can decide to connect to a semantic model. Really, what is a semantic model? It's a model that was built in another Power BI report. So you'll see that better with my demo. But for now, I just want to show you that I can choose that I want to get my data from a Power BI semantic model, right? I'm going to choose that model, Power BI demo. I'm going to click on connect. And then once I do, okay, when I open up data, you'll notice that I have some tables already, right? Ready for me to start building my report. And this is a fantastic thing to know and understand, right? So you basically have two choices with Power BI Desktop. Option number one, a developer comes in, open it up, and they start building their report, including creating all of their data connections right from the start. The other option is that you can pre-build semantic data models that the user can connect to, so that automatically, once they already see a bunch of data tables here ready for them to start using, and they can just drag and drop these elements onto their page. Say yes for now. Drag and drop elements on their page and start building their reports, right? And get into report development faster. Okay. So that is Power BI desktop. Let me minimize this and go back into my slides here.
So, Chrissy, is the desktop the only editor we have for reports, or is there one online as well?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Power BI Desktop. Let me just swap my presentation here. Power BI Desktop is by far, I think, the preferable tool for developing reports. But if you want to, you can actually use the Power BI service, the same tool that you use to administer reports. You can also go on there and click on the edit button and make modifications. But the Power BI desktop tool gives you far more flexibility in development, especially when it comes to creating semantic models. Okay, so nice question. Keep them coming. Right, so the Power BI service, this is an Azure cloud service. It is something that is going to be set up by your IT team. Once your Power BI service is set up and licensed, either you or an administrator can go in and create something called workspaces. So for example, where I work, we have a workspace for production reports, we have a workspace for development, and we have a workspace for test. At other organizations, you might decide to create workspaces based on different departments as a way to organize. But regardless, all of these workspaces are under the same cloud service and are all licensed the same way. So if your Azure cloud service is a premium capacity, then all of your workspaces within that would be premium capacity as well. These workspaces can be used to manage security, so you can control which users have access to reports in which workspaces. Of course, you can set permissions at the individual report level as well. But workspaces is kind of the nice way to go. Unfortunately, you can't create groups within those, not like folders within those workspaces. A little disappointing, but maybe someday. Automatic refresh. And this is where you're starting to see the real power of the service. Once you take your report from Power BI Desktop, publish it into the service, you can go in there and configure, I want this report to be refreshed once a day, right, 3 times a day and choose your times. In order for the automatic refresh to work, you need to go and specify credentials for each one of your data connections, right? So if the user developing the report doesn't have access to the production data, then you can reestablish those connections right in the Power BI service as well. So think of the Power BI service as like an administration tool. If you have premium capacity, no, I guess I'm jumping ahead. Within the Power BI service, you can scale and change the sizing of your Power BI service based on requirements. So for us, we had lower resources on our server, and we had to up that as more people started accessing the reports, and as our data sets were getting larger. And what's beautiful about this is it was just a matter of clicking a button, and then within minutes, probably seconds, we had more resources on our Power BI, and people were happy again. When you are using Power BI Premium, there are auto scale settings that an administrator can set so that resources can go up when, or more resources can be assigned when the server is heavily loaded, and then brought back down automatically when usage isn't as high. Logging access, and this is one thing we do quite a bit. We automatically Power BI logs people's access to the reports, and then we actually have a Power BI report that displays how frequently people are viewing the reports, which is fantastic because we know when we can bring a report down from Power BI, like, yeah, nobody's using this one anymore. Also built into the cloud service is performance monitoring, right? So when we were having our issues with the Power BI service, using performance monitoring, it was very clear that our resources were too low and needed to be increased. Okay, so that's the Power BI service. You
Christy,
access the
there is a question.
Yep.
It is how can we accelerate or facilitate Power BI adoption? So I know it's a
Okay.
it's a very generic
Yep.
question, but maybe
But I
you
like
have
it.
some. Yeah. So
I like it. I
is
do
there
like it.
like setup of workspaces or licenses or
Oh,
workshops that we can do, or how have you seen that
okay.
organizations accelerate that
How they can accelerate it. Okay.
or
Okay, I
facilitate
interpreted
it?
the question a little bit differently, but yeah, I see what you're getting at now. The first thing that I think you should do, just in terms of bringing this into your environment, is I think you really need to define overall what your views are with Power BI and self-service. And that's a word that I haven't mentioned yet. Power BI desktop is a tool that is quite easy to use. Now, I hate saying that because it's not necessarily true, but it really allows you to target a variety of skill sets. So you can have more advanced end users building their reports. And then you can also have people like me and my team who have to build really sophisticated data models, building reports as well. So one of the things that I really believe you need to do first in your environment is come up with a strategy for who is going to be creating these reports. How much are you going to support self-service? And that will help you determine, I guess, the next questions, which is how are we going to accelerate this in our organization? Because really, how do you accelerate this? You can get the Power BI service up and running very, very quickly, right? You can create your workspaces really, really quickly and give people access to those workspaces really quickly. But if you do, you might end up with kind of a free-for-all, right? Where you have, 3 different people creating the same report, but with slight differences because they interpreted the business logic differently.
So
So I think, yeah,
I guess that you're going into you want to have some governance and
yes,
maybe like a center of excellence or something like that.
yeah,
Um, and uh, and I assume training is part of your strategy here to accelerate. Like, um, would you run like workshops inside the organization and target different
yeah.
user groups and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. And like and target different user groups in that and like for example in our organization we try and have more centralized reporting. So when it comes to training, right, and this is part of your organization, you might say, all right, I've got a team of people like Christie's team, and they are responsible for creating the data models, right? In fact, one organization that I worked at, that's exactly what we did. So me and my team and I would train them on how to create the actual data models themselves, right? Those data models then can be published, and then you can have your other team of users and then another set of training to teach people how to use those existing models, right? But really, even as I'm speaking and coming up with that idea, that only works if that was your idea for your Power BI architecture in the first place. Okay, but I always want to caution people against making Power BI completely self-service in your organization. There has to be governance behind that. Does that make sense? Do you have any specific
Yeah.
questions?
No,
Yeah,
no, it was very, very open. So I think with that answer, we can move ahead.
yeah,
And
okay.
yeah,
Yeah, but I love the question though. I really do like that question because different companies do have different ideas about what they want to do with self-service. Like the one that I'm at now, it's like, nope, it's just the reporting team who creates the reports, but other companies has been also a little bit more self-service focused. Okay. Once the hard work has been done to create these reports, the next part is the consumption of the reports. How do people actually see them? I thought I had a picture on this page. I guess I don't. People can go directly into the Power BI portal to view reports. That's not terribly common because the Power BI portal is like an admin tool itself. People will only see the reports that they have access to, but right, really, it's meant more for administration. People can then build their own reporting solution. And that's what our company does, and that's what most companies do. So Power BI mobile apps, and also Power BI embedded. So Power BI embedded, you purchase a Power BI embedded license. It's actually classified as one of their premium capacities. And then what happens is you're telling Microsoft, I'm licensing in such a way that people are not going directly to the Power BI portal. I'm going to have my development team create a application such as a web application that is going to go and consume the reports,
so
right? And everybody, yeah.
if I'm like a software vendor, a software developer, and part of my solution is to show a lot of, let's say, infographics and whatnot, like I would get Power BI embedded, and then my application is the one that has the license, or
Well, Power BI embedded, it isn't really the application that has the license. It's actually the Power BI service because Power BI
mm,
embedded is a premium, is considered a premium capacity, right? So those of you who have been working with Power BI already know that you'll get a diamond next to your workspace if it's underneath, if it's covered by a premium capacity. If you're covered by Power BI embedded, you'll see that diamond next to your workspace. So it isn't really the licensing within the application. It still is a license on the Azure service itself. And that means that now any application that you build can go and connect to Power BI and show the reports in any way that you want to develop within the application. Okay, so as I'm describing that, sometimes people get a bit concerned because, okay, wait a second, Power BI embedded within an application, generally you would use a single security context to connect to the Power BI service. That's true, but there's also fancy ways that the Power BI application that you build can pass through security credentials, right? So that's fantastic because you still will be able to have row level security. So for example, at my place of work, which is really kind of cool, is when somebody's connecting using Power BI embedded to my report, it's actually a GUID that the application receives that I can use to tell who the person is. So for the people on the call who know the user underscore name function, right? Basically, the developers can control what data will be passed in and returned with that function. You can also view these reports within SharePoint. You can also just use Power BI Desktop. And I've got people on my team who do that. I shouldn't say on my team, in my place of work, the engineers, they have their own reports that they use for their own purposes. We don't support them, and they just decide to do that on their own. So what is a semantic data model? Oh, any questions? I should pause there.
I didn't see questions, no.
Okay, cool. So you keep hearing me talk about semantic data models. So what is a semantic data model? A semantic data model is a representation of data that's just ready for reporting and visualization, right? So earlier in the presentation, you saw me open up Power BI Desktop and you saw me connect to another Power BI to a semantic data model, and automatically all of the tables and reports popped up, right? And it gives a really great start for creating the reports, right? It's called a semantic data model because when you're building the data model, you're not just thinking about data, but you're also thinking about the meaning of the data. Creating semantic models requires you to set up relationships between the tables so that when the developer starts building a report, Power BI automatically knows how everything is created. When you create that data model, you're going to be thinking carefully about what column names you want to use for all of the data so that it's meaningful to the end user. How do you build these semantic data models? They're built right in Power BI Desktop. And for the more advanced users in the call, you can also use Visual Studio for creating these data models as well, right? So these data models are supported within Power BI. They're also supported in analysis services, right? So if you're creating the analysis services data models, you're probably more likely to be using Visual Studio. So you can build them right in Power BI Desktop. Building the model has a look and feel of creating like a database. You'll see me doing that very soon. The data models are consumed using DAX. So your advanced end users will probably be creating reports just simply with drag and drop and adding a few filters here and there. But for your advanced IT developers, they can create more sophisticated reports with more sophisticated calculations using a technology called DAX. When you are creating your semantic models, there are three modes that you can use: import and direct query, and composite. I almost shouldn't have put composite on the list because composite is really both import and direct query used together within a single model. So with the import mode, as you're building your model and you hit the refresh button, the data is actually moved from the source system into your Power BI report, right? So it's actually there in the report itself. The impact, there's going to be an impact on the source systems only during refresh time. And this is something that I have to remind people a lot, right? That, hey, you're refreshing your reports, let's say only in the evening. That means the systems will only be hit related to reporting in the evening. So during the day, right, you've now offloaded the work to the report itself. Okay, the Power BI service authenticates against the source system. Now, when the data is imported, this isn't just about the data being stored in Power BI. It's actually being stored in a very performant way. Getting a little bit technical here. Some of you may have heard about the Vertipack storage engine. That same Vertipack storage engine that you've heard about related to analysis services, related to column store indexes in SQL. Yeah, that same engine is part of Power BI. And what that means is that when you get the data is very, very highly compressed. You don't use row-based storage like a SQL server would. The data uses what we call column-based storage, right? I'll let you go and read up about that on your own. But overall, what it means is that when the data comes into Power BI, it can be searched through very, very quickly because the data is compressed and Power BI is only looking at the columns that you actually need. All of this data is stored in memory, right? So that means, of course, that it's fast. Because it's stored in memory, I would also encourage everybody to think carefully about the number of columns that they're bringing in to, make sure that your memory usage is efficient. So import mode is the mode that I like the best, and is the one that I think most people should be using. But there is also another mode called direct query. With direct query, when you're building the data model, it looks and feels during the development part very much like you are in import mode. But the data is not actually loaded into the Power BI report. Instead, what happens is once this goes into production and you deploy it, when somebody uses the report, Power BI sends the queries to the underlying data source to retrieve the necessary data. So the performance of the underlying source systems now absolutely need to be considered here because the source systems will be hit constantly as people are using the report. Okay, I lied a bit when I said it's exactly the same as creating import mode models. No, because there are some restrictions in terms of the type of operations you can do with transformations if you're using direct query. But if you are in direct query mode, the tool will tell you that. It just won't allow you to perform those sorts of operations. You can change from direct query to import mode at any time, but not the reverse. So it's interesting, in a lot of the places that I've worked in, often people start with direct query, right? And then, I tell them the advantages of import mode, especially if you are working in an environment where you have some sort of ETL process that's loading the data daily and your source data isn't updating constantly anyway, then import mode is the way to go, right? So then I convince them to switch to import. But why would you use direct query then, right? I'm not saying that it's not useful. If security needs to be enforced at the source system, then you would want to use direct query. I was working at a place where they were very, very much against putting any data into the cloud, right? Whether that was reasonable or not is a whole other discussion. So because of that, we had to use direct query and, of course, gateways to the source system. It might be useful as well if you've got larger data sources. The disadvantages of direct query, though, visuals can technically get out of sync, right? Because if somebody's working with one visual and the query has run, the data may not be changing for another visual. And also, it only works for limited data sources. So of course, direct query works great with relational database management systems such as SQL, but not CSVs, right? So there's only a limited number of data sources that will work with. Okay, any questions before I start my demo?
Demo. Nope, no
Yay.
questions.
Okay. Okay, so actually what I'm going to do here, I'm going to close this up, don't save it, I'm going to start again. So once Power BI Desktop is installed on your machine, you can just launch it as an application. I'm going to choose blank report here. Now, if this is the first time you've ever started using Power BI Desktop, it will prompt you to sign in. Okay, so what's that all about? Well, it wants you to sign in so that it knows what tenant you're working with in the Power BI service itself, right? If you are just starting, you're like, I don't even have a Power BI service yet, you don't need to sign in. You can just cancel. Of course, the tool will keep prompting you though, right? Because Microsoft, of course, wants you to encourage you to use their service. So I have already signed in, right? If I clicked on sign out here, then I'd have the option to sign in again. I'm actually signed in with my work account, so it knows what service to connect to, right? So I'm just going to click here, blank report, and I'm going to get started. I guess I have some recovery files here. I'll just ignore that for now. So step number 1 is to figure out what semantic data model you're going to use. I've already done a demo with you where you can actually go and get data and browse to an existing semantic model. Please remember that this option is out there because one thing that we did at my place of work is that we created a semantic data model for health and safety. And then now, whenever a health and safety report needs to be created, we connect to that data model and start building the report from there. So one data model, multiple reports. That becomes really, really important because if we had created 10 different Power BI reports, each with the data model within it, well, we would be 1, repeating work. 2, if they were refreshed at different times, the data in the different reports would be different. Okay, so really, really keep this option in mind. And us at Central Logic are here to help you guys and guide you through making those types of decisions if you need us. Okay, I don't have a semantic data model. How do I build them, Christy? Well, you build semantic data models in Power BI Desktop. Really, building the model is kind of the same look and feel as creating a report itself, okay? So I'm going to pretend that I'm building a data model itself. So the first thing you need to do is go and get data. So when I choose... oh, I shouldn't have done that so quickly. Take a look at the huge number of options you have for data sources. And if from this list, the one you want isn't there, then you can click on more and type in, like, for example, we've got JSON, right? So just look around and see what you can find. And also online, there's additional connectors that you can download and install as well. But the main ones that you'll need will and should be there. So I'm going to use SQL Server as an example, but I want to start out by teaching you guys good practices, right? When I choose SQL Server, it's going to prompt me for the name and the database name. We don't really want to have connection strings lingering throughout all of our code. So just like in other development environments, we have the ability to create parameters. So I'm just going to go into transform data here. I'm going to go manage new parameter, right? And I am going to create a parameter called SQL server that is of the type text. I'm going to create SQL database that is also of the type text, right? And of course, I should put in the values here. I'm just going to use my local SQL server, right? I'm not going to get fancy and use a SQL Azure database. And Power BI demo is the name of my database. So I'm going to say okay. And then now I have my 2 parameters. And then what's super cool about using parameters as well is that these parameters will expose themselves in the Power BI service online. So a developer or an administrator, if a connection were to change, right, would be able to go in and just change the parameter. Okay, so then now I can go and connect to SQL Server. Notice I now have this drop-down list because it knows I have parameters, and I can say that I have a SQL Server. I want the server to use the parameter SQL Server to get the name, and the database name is going to come from a parameter called SQL Database. Okay, and then here is where you can choose the connectivity mode, import or direct query. You can write a SQL statement to choose which table, or you can write a SQL statement to have better control over what data you want to bring. So you could write a query with like 7 joins and group bys and you know the type of work that you want to push onto the SQL Server itself. Absolutely, you can do that. For this demo, though, I'm going to just click on OK. And then because I didn't specify a query, it then shows me all of the tables that I have in that database. I can select the tables that I want, and then I'm going to click on load. Okay, and then now you're starting to see, right, that data model that we saw at the beginning of the presentation, right? So certainly more work needs to be done on this, but once I'm finished, I can put it up on the service. Other people can connect to the same data model and start building reports off of what I have built here. What's the fun if I can't transform data, right? So once I have my data, I'm going to go back into the transform screen, and then I can do work transforming my data. So for example, for the people here who are used to building data warehouses, right, and having dimensions, right, you can build your own dimensions in your Power BI model. So I'm actually going to just cheat a little bit here. I'm going to duplicate this query and say, you know, I want to have a package dimension, right? And I want to build that package dimension from this table. I want the package. I want the package name. I want to know the status. And I think I have vendor in here as well. So I can choose vendor. And I'll say remove other columns, right? So I have a nice, really graphical way of designing my transformations, right? I can go to package here, select transform, and I can convert everything to uppercase or lowercase, right? I can, where is my split? Because I do that all the time. Split column, right? I can split by delimiter, or I can split by, you know, number of characters, right? So I can say I want to split after the first 2 characters, right? And I can get just those first two letters, right? Because let's say that is meaningful to me in my organization because it's, let's say, the classification of the package. Look how easy that was to do.
Yeah, you know,
If
when I used it, Christy, I connected to the Azure uh, cost consumption one, and it brought tags with it in a single column, so I could split
Yes,
by like
yes.
semicolon, and then do a split on the split, and
Oh
then
yeah,
I could have like value, like key value pairs, right? So it
yeah,
was really cool, and it does it for you. I
yeah.
really like the apply steps, like kind of is like a historical thing,
Oh, it's
like
beautiful.
you start with your source, and then you start applying all the transformations you want, and the order is important because you could
Absolutely.
on one step be acting on the result that you created the step before. So I really love this part.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. And one thing I get my developers to do, they don't always listen to me though, but please have your developers do this and listen. Rename these steps, right? So split, and I usually tend to keep the split there to remind me what I did. Split, get the category, right? Because like you're going to have tons of steps if your data needs lots of transformation. So giving good category names. So I'm glad you brought that up, Ricardo, is so important. And yeah, the order is important. And then look at this, this is beautiful. Oh no, I don't really need that. So you can go and get rid of that work very easily. And just one more thing that I want to show you, because I thank you, Ricardo, for your comment on how nice. Oops, why is this not? There we go. How
Yeah,
nice the
and be
split
aware
is.
that if you have reports using this data source and you change it, you may break them. I learned that the wrong way. So
Yes,
yeah, when you start transforming data that is already on a grid or is part of like a visualization, you might break stuff. So be careful.
exactly. Thank you for that advice, right? And I just wanted to show you here, like when Ricardo was saying how useful this has been for him. Keep in mind that you can split not only into separate columns, but also into different rows. Okay, I love this one because I've had a number of data sources where the data comes in as comma separated values in a single column, which of course violates all the rules of normalization, and we should have a chat with those people. But regardless, if I get data like that, then I can say split by the commas and put it into rows. We could have a talk just on this, right? Just on transformations. So anyway, and I know it's 11, but just give me about 10 more minutes. And but if you have to leave, you can always view the rest of the demo by coming back and looking at the recording. But look, I created my package dimension, right? And I've had to do that many times where I have packages in a variety of different sources, and I can bring them all together within one report. I'm going to close this up. Do I want to apply my changes? I'm going to say yes. And then when you saw that refresh happening, that was actually Power BI bringing the data into your Power BI file, right? The next thing that you're going to want to do is like work here in your model to build the database. So, yeah, if you know how to build databases, you know how to build models, right? So I'm going to come in here and I would want to set a relationship between my package dimension and my milestones. So there's my package column. So just drag and drop, right? Why on earth is it many to many? I know why it's many to many because I forgot to finish my demo here. Give me a second here. I'm going to edit query. Of course, if I'm going to create this dimension, I want to remove duplicates. Okay. And notice how smart that was. I'm kind of glad I made that mistake because I learned it right away that I made one. And that's why Power BI is so user friendly and can get you developing quick, right? When I do my drag and drop, it's still many to many. What on earth did I do? Okay, you know what? I really want this to work. So what I'm going to do, in real life, I would spend more time. Um, demonstrating this. Okay, I'm just going to grab those two columns. So I'm not going to really have any exciting dimension columns in this example. And if it's still many to many, okay, so now it's one to many. Okay, and I'm going to say save, right? And what it does is it creates the relationship, just like in a database, right? One to many. I don't think I could have even made this one to many one to many if I wanted to, if it was not what it was seeing in the data itself. Okay, and then for my date table, right, I'm going to grab date and I'm going to send that to the forecast date column to set up a relationship. So I've got a date dimension there as well. Okay, so this is me building the semantic data model. And if I didn't like the name of, the package, let's say people know that is something different, I can come in there and call it description. Okay. So this is my data model. I could go and publish it. Other people can connect to it like I've shown you already, or, right, this could be both a model and a report together within the same Power BI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a pie chart. Okay, and in the pie chart, I might decide that I want to do for, I guess I'll do it on my package milestone table. I'm going to grab package. I'm going to drag it to values. And I'm going to want this to do a distinct count of all of the packages that I have. So I've got 264 packages, which of course is very boring to have a graph like that. I need to provide it meaning. You provide your charts meaning by using dimensions. So apologies for my mistake on my package dimension table. I'm just going to have to cheat and grab vendor from my milestones table. Just pretend I'm getting it from my dimension table. But what I can do is add that in as a legend and then look at how beautiful this turns out for me. I can see the number of packages that I have for each one of my different vendors. Okay. Was just done through drag and drop, really not a whole lot of coding involved. If I want, I can add a slicer, and this is where the relationships become important. And let's say I want people to be able to choose, let's say, a group of packages, then I create a slicer for that. So I can go into my dimension, grab package. I don't know. I find that the fact that they make it a list by default is annoying. I wish drop down was the default, right? And I can come in here and select the packages that I'm interested in. Let me hold down the control key, right? And now, there are 3 packages. Not very exciting because the ones that I chose all came from one vendor, right? So now I've got one great big blue circle, but hey, that's still telling you something, right? So it slices the data for you nice and easily. And how Power BI was able to do that is because of the work involved in creating these data models, right? So one thing that happens is that you might go to Microsoft presentations that are more focused on creating the Power BI reports themselves and see, wow, drag and drop. So easy to create reports. It's like magic. Yeah, it's like magic, but that's because a significant amount of work goes into creating this model in the background, right? And that's where you tend to need to have, well-trained developers in terms of technical knowledge, and as well as good knowledge of the data in your environment so that they can create semantic models that are useful to everybody, right? And that's why I love the fact that they're called semantic data models. It's such an important word because when you're doing your development, you're really putting meaning into this as well. Okay, one more thing that I want to show you here. I'm going to clear out this slicer. I'm going to go and add a table here. I can drag it to where I want to be. I know this isn't the most beautiful report in the world. Once you're done, of course, you're going to format it, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I want to see the package, the package name, the milestone, and the planned date for that milestone. And then what ends up happening is that, let's say you're interested in all of these packages from Central Logic. You click on this slicer, and I don't know if you noticed, but this graph changed to show you all of the packages that are from that particular vendor. Okay, and then if I choose, I can't remember which one I did first. I think I did Central Logic, right? You can also click on the legend. I love that. And then if I click on Microsoft, right, you'll see the details of the ones here from Microsoft. So that's what they mean by interactive insights. You hear that word all the time because as you're building the report and the data model and the relationships, you are devising an interactivity path for the users when their report is being consumed. Okay, so there's my quick demo. Are there any questions